All right, now this story right here is just nuts to me. This is nuts to me. Last week I was talking about Joel Santana. Joel Santana. Shout out to Joel Santana.
Tomato.
Because that was what he was last week. Joel Santana was making an argument how kids don't need to read anymore. And that is just
tomato.
One of the worst things I'd seen in a very long time. And so, but it reminded me quite a bit of conversations I have had with educators, people who teach in higher education, knowledge. Dr. Jabari Evans from Kids in the Hall, for example, he's a professor at the University of South Carolina. Professor Sky, he's another college professor at the same time. So I understand. I understand. A lot of things have changed since probably most of us were in school. And the biggest one, I think, is COVID. After COVID, when COVID hit, we sent kids to Zoom school and we sent them home. and teachers were just letting people go through the gates. And one of the things I talked about last week was how there's a case in Connecticut where a student is suing the city of Hartford for graduating her from high school, even though she was illiterate. Now, I don't even know how that happens, right? The point is, this is in the zeitgeist. This is in the zeitgeist. And so today there was a huge story. I don't even say it's a huge story, but it's a viral story. And I think there's going to be more people covering it during the course of the week. I just thought it was really crazy. Okay, so we're going to set this up. This is actually a multi-part story here. But let's check out what's happening in Oklahoma, the 50th state in the union when it comes to education. So this was posted by Turning Point USA. Okay, so Turning Point USA. Let's see if that's better. We should make that bigger. Yep. So Turning Point USA posted this. They said, for a psychology course at the University of Oklahoma, Samantha Fulnecki was asked to write a 650-word essay reacting to an article about how people are perceived based on societal expectations of gender. In her essay, Fulnecki argued that traditional gender roles should not be considered stereotypes. She cited the Bible to support her stance that eliminating gender in society would be detrimental because that would put people farther from God's original plan for humans. She received 0 points out of 25 on the essay, 0 out of 25. Transgender professor Mel Curtis said Ms. Fulnecki failed to use empirical evidence and called parts of her essay offensive. To call an entire group of people demonic is highly offensive, especially a minoritized population, the instructor wrote in the online grading platform. Fulnecki says she followed the assignment guidelines and should not be penalized for her religious viewpoints. Oklahoma University officials point to the formal grade appeal process as the student awaits decision. We at Turning Point USA stand with Samantha. We should not be letting mentally ill professors around students. Clearly, this professor lacks the intellectual maturity to set her own bias aside and take grading seriously. Professors like these are the very reason conservatives can't voice their beliefs in the classroom. Kudos to Samantha for leading by example and standing up for what she believes in. Oklahoma, do better, right? And so here's Samantha, right? So Samantha, based on this post, it sounds like Samantha wrote an essay and the professor failed her because they disagreed with her religious beliefs, right? Now, if that's the case, I support it. You know what I mean? Like if people are out here getting bad grades just because they expressed what they believed in on the college campus, I'm with it, right? So I thought that was fine, right? So then I go down here and then they say, here's the professor's response to Samantha's essay. And they have a list. They have all the things the professor said. I was like, oh, this is cool. They're sourcing. This is great. And then they said, this is Samantha's essay. So I was like, okay, well, let's go see the essay. And then we'll go see what, we'll see what the professor said. So I go look at the essay. All right. And so here's the essay. The essay says, this article was very thought-provoking and caused me to thoroughly evaluate the idea of gender and the role it plays in our society. The article discussed peers using teasing as a way to enforce gender norms. I do not necessarily see this as a problem. God made male and female and made us differently from each other on purpose and for a purpose. God is very intentional with what he makes, and I believe trying to change that would only do more harm. Gender roles and tendencies should not be considered stereotypes. Women naturally want to do womanly things because God created us with those womanly desires in our hearts. Women, I got to read that again. Women naturally want to do womanly things because God created us with those womanly desires in our hearts. I mean, that's a very circular statement, right? It's like saying, you know, God wants us to play PlayStation because God created us with PlayStation-y things in our hearts. You know, cats want to do cat things because cats were born with catly things in their hearts. You know, it's like, from a college level paper, that doesn't feel like this is a psychology course. So when I got to this line, I'm like, oh, wow, this is crazy. Women naturally want to do womanly things because God created us with those womanly desires in our hearts. The same goes for men. God created men in the image of his courage and strength, and he created women in the image of his beauty. He intentionally created women differently than men, and we should live our lives with that in mind. Okay. Then she says, it is frustrating to me when I read articles like this and discussion posts from my classmates of so many people trying to conform to the same mundane opinion so they do not step on people's toes. I think that is a cowardly way to live. It is important to use the freedom of speech we have been given in this country, and I personally believe that eliminating gender in our society would be detrimental as it pulls us farther from God's original plan for humans. It is perfectly normal for kids to follow gender stereotypes because that is how God made us. The reason so many girls want to feel womanly and care for others is in a motherly way is not because they feel pressure to fit into social norms. It is because God created and chose them to reflect his beauty and his compassion in that way. In Genesis, God says that it is not good for man to be alone. So he created a helper for man, which is a woman. Many people assume the word helper in this context to be condescending and offensive to women. However, the original word for Hebrew is ezer kenegdo, and that directly translates to helper equal to. Additionally, God describes himself in the Bible using ezer kenegdo, or helper, and he describes his Holy Spirit as our helper as well. This shows the importance of God places on the role of helper, women's roles. God does not view women as less significant than men. He created us with such intentionality and care. He made women in his image of being a helper and in the image of his beauty. If leaning into the role means I am following gender stereotypes, then I'm happy to be following a stereotype that aligns with the gifts and abilities God gave me as a woman. And then here's the end of it. I do not think men and women are pressured to be more masculine or feminine. I strongly disagree with the idea from the article that encouraging acceptance of diverse gender expressions could improve students' confidence. Society pushing the lie that there are multiple genders and everyone should be whatever they want to be is demonic and severely harms American youth. I do not want kids to be teased or bullied in school. However, pushing the lie that everyone has their own truth and everyone can do whatever they want and be whoever they want is not biblical whatsoever. The Bible says that our lives are not our own, but that our lives and bodies belong to the Lord for his glory. I live my life based on his truth and firmly believe that there would be less gender issues and insecurities in children if they were raised knowing that they do not belong to themselves, but they belong to the Lord. Right. So I looked at this, I was like, oh, wow, I'm surprised they even really posted the actual article, because away from whatever the opinion is that this student, you know, whatever her perspective is on this case, when I read that, I don't see at least what I remember to be college editorials or college opinion papers or college psychology opinion papers, particularly. Like there were certain, like when I was in school, like you had to reinforce things with sources, you know, like you had to cite things, you had to put footnotes at the bottom. The only reason I know how to put a footnote at the bottom of like a Word document now is because I had to do it in college. You know what I mean? Like, generally speaking, that's what I expect to see in a college course. And this student's a junior, right? So I read that and I was like, oh, wow, okay, well, what was the assignment? Like, wait, what was the actual assignment? I don't think I lost the assignment here. Turning Point USA told me that this woman got a bad grade because of her beliefs. I read the essay and it reads like an Instagram post. So maybe I'm missing something here. And it's a psychology course, so I'm confused, right? So I go over here and I look over here and let's see. Okay. So I go over here and here's the actual professor's comment. One, they label it trans professor's comment, which is eyebrow raising to me, because clearly I can see the angle that they're going for here. But here's what they said. Please note that I'm not deducting points, because you have certain beliefs, but I instead am deducting points for you posting a reaction paper that does not answer the questions for this assignment, contradicts itself, heavily uses personal ideology over empirical evidence in a scientific class, and is at times offensive. All right, so the first thing she says is, I'm not deducting points because of your beliefs. Well, the whole Turning Point USA framing is that, oh, this is because of their beliefs. So up front, the professor says, instead, I'm deducting points for you posting a reaction paper that does not answer the questions for this assignment, contradicts itself, heavily uses personal ideology over empirical evidence in scientific class, and is at times offensive. While you're entitled to your own personal beliefs, there is an appropriate time or place to implement them in your reflections. I encourage all students to question or challenge the course material with other empirical findings or testable hypotheses, but using your own personal beliefs to argue against the findings of not only this article, but the findings of countless articles across psychology, biology, sociology, et cetera, is not best practice. You argue that abiding by normative gender roles is beneficial. It is perfectly fine to believe this, but to then say everyone should act the same while also saying that people aren't pressured into gender expectations is contradictory. Right, that's what she said. She was saying, I don't think anybody should be bullied into being these things. We should all just do this thing that everyone is doing because God, right? So the same while also saying that people aren't pressured into gender expectations is contradictory, especially since your arguments reflect a religious pressure to act in gender stereotypical ways. You can say that strict gender norms don't create gender stereotypes, but that isn't true by definition of what a stereotype is. Please note that acknowledging gender stereotypes does not immediately denote a negative connotation, a nuance this article discusses. Additionally, to call an entire group of people demonic is highly offensive, especially a minoritized population. You are entitled to your own beliefs, but this isn't a vague narrative of society pushes lies, but instead the result of countless years of developing psychological and scientific evidence for these claims and directly interacting with the communities involved. You may personally disagree with this, but that doesn't change the fact that every major psychological, medical, pediatric, and psychiatric institute in the United States acknowledges that biologically and psychologically, sex and gender is neither binary nor fixed. I implore you apply some more perspective and empathy in your work. If you personally disagree with the findings, then by all means share your criticisms, but make sure you do so in a way that is appropriate and using the methodology of empirical psychology as aligned with the learning goals in this class, right? So she's reading her, but she's also bringing it back to, hey, but we need you to express your opinions based on empirical psychology as aligned with the learning goals in this class. All right, whatever your opinion is, just do it with empirical psychology, right? And to me, this is where it started to feel like this teacher got set up. I personally feel like this is starting to look like a setup. All right, I'll explain here in a second. If you have any additional questions or concerns about this, or would like someone additional educational resources, I would be happy to discuss this further and provide you with them. And here's another teacher, right? This is another teacher. Samantha, I am the other instructor for this course, and I have also taken time to read your paper. I concur with Mel on the grade you received. This paper should not be considered as a completion of the assignment. Everyone has different ways in which they see the world, but in an academic course such as this, you are being asked to support your ideas with empirical evidence and higher level reasoning. I find it concerning that you state that at the beginning of your paper that you do not think bullying is a bad thing. In addition, your paper directly and harshly criticizes your peers and their opinions, which are just as valuable as yours. Disagreeing with others is fine, but there's a respectful way to go about it. That goes for discussion posts as well as reaction papers. Please employ more thoughtfulness in your future assignments. Right, so it says additional professor. So they said, this is what the trans professor said, and this is what the additional professor said, right? I mean, the whole thing is just kind of wild how they labeled this. So I'm looking at this, and I'm like, yo, this is crazy. You know, we are literally in idiocracy. Like, I was just watching this last week with with Joel Santana telling me that people didn't need to read. And maybe a lot of people agree with Joel Santana, because looking at that paper, after I read her paper, for me, I looked at that and I was like, oh, okay, I see where her point of view is. There's a number of ways to argue this. Like, okay, you can go, at this point in time, you can go find almost any kind of scientist that will support any sort of social, political issue, right? Any issue you have, if you think, I don't know, dogs can have 3 legs or something, there's a paper somewhere you can go cite, and you can go cite that paper, right? If you want to say, like, you know, what was it called? I can't think of what it's called. Oh, well, you know how, like, you have eugenicists, there's some, if you want to go make arguments that are pro-eugenics, there's all kind of eugenicists out there. They've all been debunked, but fine, you can go do this, right? If you want to talk about the Bible, you got the whole Bible. You got the whole Bible. You can say, well, Genesis chapter 6, verse 12 through 14 in the King James Version, it says this. Like, I'm looking at this, I'm like, yo, there's a bunch of ways to say that you don't like trans people. Like, that's really all she wanted to say. Was she wanted to say she didn't like trans people in 650 words. And she could have done this by looking at whatever scientist, Googling whatever Grok says on Twitter, and pulling out whatever quotes on the Bible and called it a day. It actually would have taken up word count space, because that's one of the best cheats when you used to have to do word count. Find big block quotes. I got 1,000 words. Let me go find 250 words of quotes. You know what I'm saying? They could have easily done that. But she didn't do any of this, all right? And so she got a 0 out of 25. Homegirl got a 0 out of 25 on her test, on her paper, and went to Turning Point USA. And Turning Point USA, they framed all of it, again, down to, she received 0 points out of 25 on the essay. Transgender professor Mel Curtis said Ms. Flunks failed to use empirical evidence and called parts of her essay offensive. The pull quote they pulled out was where the professor, Mel, that's where Mel messed up. She messed up when she said to call an entire group of people as demonic is highly offensive, especially a minoritized population. That's where she messed up. She gave too much of her hand. She shouldn't have said that. But they made this whole thing saying that she got a bad grade because her religious beliefs and her Christian beliefs.
Tomato.
I thought this was the wildest thing ever, right? Now, the second thing I thought about was, well, this is the state of Oklahoma. And Oklahoma has been in the news quite a bit lately, because Oklahoma is now 50th in the state in education. And over the past, I think since the first Trump administration, they have gone all in on the red team. They're the only state in the union where every county went red. And as a result of that, they've been able to just do sweeping Confederate policies all the way up and down. All just Confederate, everything Confederate, right? It's 1857 over there in Oklahoma right now. And one of the huge stories that's been breaking in Oklahoma has been the school superintendent. And the school superintendent, he just had to step down for corruption after the few years he was in office. But he was requiring every school, every classroom to have a Bible in the classroom. And not just a Bible, a Trump Bible. A Trump Bible that had a constitution in the back of it that wasn't the actual Constitution. Like, I'm not making this up. This is what's been happening in Oklahoma. And so their education system is going crazy downhill, right? So I looked at this, I'm like, oh man, this is at the University of Oklahoma. I bet they're going to side with the student. And then today, there was a story. and Oklahoma, University of Oklahoma left a statement. So here's what the University of Oklahoma said. The University of Oklahoma takes seriously concerns involving First Amendment rights, certainly including religious freedoms. Upon receiving notice from the student on the grading of an assignment, the university immediately began a full review of the situation has acted swiftly to address the matter. First, the college acted immediately to address the academic issue raised by the student. College leaders contacted her on the day her letter was received and have maintained regular communication throughout the process. As previously stated, a formal grade appeals process was conducted. The process resulted in steps to ensure no academic harm to the student from the graded assignments. The process resulted in steps to ensure no academic harm to the student from the graded assignments. That's a weird sentence. One, it sounds like that sentence was written in Oklahoma. But two, I believe that's what that says is, hey, we're going to let the student slide on this one. We're going to let the student slide on this one.
Tomato.
Second, the student reported filing a claim of illegal discrimination based on religious beliefs to the appropriate university office. OU has a clear process for reviewing such claims, and it has been activated. The graduate student instructor has been placed on administrative leave pending the finalization of this process. To ensure fairness in the process, a full-time professor is serving as the course instructor for the remainder of the semester. OU remains firmly committed to fairness, respect, and protecting every student's rights to express sincerely held religious beliefs.
Tomato.
Oklahoma protected her grade, and they put the professor on administrative leave, and they're reviewing this for religious discrimination. And so this is DEI for Christians. This is where we're at. This is like the cake lady in Kentucky. There's this lady who didn't want to make a cake for a gay couple that came in there. And she took it all the way to the Supreme Court, got to meet Trump. So she wouldn't have to make a cake. In this case, you get to break all science expectations in research study and how opinions are written. You get to skirt the assignment as a whole, as long as you say, I'm a Christian. University of Oklahoma is a public school. Okay, public tax dollars are used to run this school. That's part of where we are now too in the education system. You have a number of private schools doing states who are giving public dollars to wealthy people by coming up with voucher programs, which takes public dollars and allows families to use them to go to private schools. So if a private school is $10,000 and you get a $3,000 voucher, it helps cut the cost. The problem with that is, I don't know about y'all, I did not grow up in a family where my parents could pay $10,000 a year for school. So if we got a $3,000 voucher, that's still $7,000. And I did not grow up in a family that could pay $7,000 a month for school. So it's just a way to move money from the public base and public people into wealthy hands in private institutions. It's happening nationwide. But that's what this is. And I think this was a setup because this is Turning Point USA. Again, that's how I saw this in the first place. And they have campuses nationwide in high schools and colleges. And this is part of their mission. This is part of what Charlie Kirk is being celebrated for. You know, one of their missions is to make all institutions Confederate. They want to have Confederate points of views, Confederate ideologies permeate through college campuses. One of the problems that they have, generally speaking, is that when you look at people who vote for the red team, it's the uneducated. So when a man or woman goes to college, there's a less likely chance that they're going to support, in this case, President Trump. There was actually a poll that was just recently released about that. And I think I still have the statistics on this. The point is, this is a bigger conversation that's happening nationwide on multiple levels. And here is an example that happened in the past 2 days that really perfectly captures it. Here is the poll that I was referring to. You guys see that? Let's see. Yeah, so here is the poll that came out recently. Okay, the poll says, NBC poll opinion of Trump, white men, no degree plus 41, white men college degree plus 1. So there's a 40-point shift with white men who go to college. White women, no degree plus 14. White women with a college degree, negative 38. Now, the post here says, what is it about universities that does this to white women? It's not just white women, it's people. It's called education, right? So they've been finding ways to attack colleges with this. And this is what we're seeing right here. Like, this is an example of what we're seeing that is happening on the ground. And I'm just flabbergasted when I saw this story. And it looks to me like it was a setup. Because again, this is Turning Point USA. This is a trans teacher. And it became a major story really quickly. And it's happening in Oklahoma. You know, this seems like one of those insurgent stories that happen. I can't prove that. That's just how it feels in my gut. So the reactions to this have been pretty incredible. And so here are a few reactions that we see here. This one's from Giggly. You guys got that? Yeah, you got that. Giggly says Giggly is replying to the Calvin Coolidge Project, which says, report University professor Mel Curtis has failed a student named Samantha K for quoting from the Bible in her essay based on gender roles. Well, we just read the essay. And based on what we read, I agree with Giggly. She says, she wasn't failed for quoting the Bible. I received an A on this at Harvard during my first year, and I wrote about Christianity and cited the Bible in an expository writing class. You can quote the Bible, you just have to write a decent essay. That's what the problem is here. The essay wasn't even an attempt at really being an essay. 1 second, applause to that comment. No Signal says, I can see why Oklahoma is ranked 50th in education. Yeah, I can see it too. That's about right there. 1 second, applause that one. Here's another one from Nate. It says, if I see a Christian pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope they're qualified. Now, that's a direct quote at Charlie Kirk, right? Because one of Charlie Kirk's famous quotes was, if I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, man, I hope they're qualified. That's what Charlie Kirk said, right? Well, Nate's like, if I see a Christian pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope they're qualified. And that's really the problem with this type of decision, right? The problem with this is that now you have people who are going to start looking at these institutions as if like, yo, there's no way this person can be competent and go there. It's going to start traveling. I'm looking at the University of Oklahoma side eye, like, whoa, you went to the University of Oklahoma? I don't know if this is the year to be bragging about that, homeboy. Arvo Flat says, the American right is so weak and stupid, they want affirmative action for grades. That's what it reads. That's how I was reading. 1 second, applause. And this one here from Derek Davison says, does this policy apply across the board? Can I get an MD at Oklahoma by saying shit like, livers are livers because God make them want to do liverly things? That would fucking rule. 1 second, applause. Oh my gosh, it's so hilarious to me. And here's the last one from Dr. Kareem Carr. This is what they always claim universities did for minorities, force professors to lower standards in the name of political ideology. Come to find out, they're projecting onto others what they desperately wanted for themselves. DEI for conservatives. Point is this. Don't ever listen to Joel Santana. Don't listen to nobody that tell you that reading ain't important. Don't listen to nobody gaslight you and say that you only got your position because of the color of your skin or because you checked a box or whatever. Can't worry about that stuff because that's going to happen one way or the other. And we're seeing it now. And we're seeing it used for situations like this. We're seeing it used in a sense with Charlie Kirk. I mean, my man got statues all over the place. Oklahoma just passed something that required all schools to have a Charlie Kirk statue. We're on the other side of the conversation at this point in time. And I think these stories continue to remind me how important it is for people to be as educated as possible, be able to hone their critical thinking skills, to be able to understand text, and be able to understand that this is where we are now. And higher education in 2025 also comes with some of the craziest scapegoat that I've ever seen. So everybody be safe out there. But this story is wild. Let me know what you think about this in the comment section. My name is Justin Hunt. Like, subscribe to the channel. Follow the Company Man on everything, including the Company Man podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. It's all happening.
Justin Hunt is here, it's all happening. Justin Hunt is here, it's all happening. The mathematical breakdown of this mighty game of rap we in. It's boom bapping in. Systematical culture views, it's radical, it's all happening. Shaking hands and dapping it. Life through the lens of hip hop, from trip hop to yes, yes, dog, you don't stop, you don't stop. Justin Hunt is here, it's all happening. It's all happening, yes, it's all happening. Justin Hunt is here, it's all happening. It's all happening, yes, it's all happening.